to. Mr Speaker,
Honourable Trevor Mallard.
I think one should probably start by looking at the regulatory impact statement. With this bill, it is probably the reverse of the way that is done on occasion. But I think if one looks carefully at this, we see what a nonsense the bill is. We see the statement from the Treasury and the Ministry of Economic Development, which say that proposed changes may not improve the functioning of the legislation. They note the balance of costs and benefits of the package of the proposed changes is not clear. At a minimum, amendments are likely to impose transitional costs on both employers and employees, and the extent of other potential costs is unclear. They say that the cost of implementing it is likely to be so high that most employers will not use it, and that the proposal will create new tensions between employers and employees. I think if we have the two, well, I think are pretty fairly described as ideologically right-wing agencies of the state, basically saying that this won't work, and it's a nonsense. The very agencies that one would think would be able to come in behind, provide the government with an argument to back up their nonsense. I think it's fair to say that for big parts of it, the Department of Labour says there's either not enough research or they haven't got enough time, or in some cases the Minister didn't even ask them. She just wrote the legislation and didn't ask them for a view or what material or what facts were in their possession in relation to this. And maybe they don't care about it. Maybe they don't care about the effects that they have on Kiwi families. And that's something which I'm beginning to see. There was an interesting comment that was made a couple of years ago by someone about the New Zealand situation when he said long hours at work, both parents in employment, childcare shortages, growing interest rates, rising bills can be a far from ideal environment for good parenting and healthy family relationships. Well, no, suicide rates weren't mentioned by John Key. Weren't mentioned by John Key when he talked about the pressure that was going on for him. Just before he became Prime Minister. The Prime Minister. And the point where he was pretending he was supportive of a high-wage economy rather than introducing measures which are deliberately designed in order to drive down wages and to reduce the conditions for wage and salary earners in New Zealand. Now, he's dressing this up as an attack on unionists and union members. But actually what all of us know is that his secret agenda is to very quietly undermine the wages and salaries of middle-income New Zealanders on behalf of the people who give him the very big donations to the National Party. That is what he is doing. He'll never admit it. He will never admit it, but that is what he is doing. He's not only attacking those people right at the bottom of the heap, but what this legislation does, it puts the pressure on middle New Zealand in a number of ways, which I'd like to get into, Mr Speaker. The National Party, I think, in the past used to be more honest. They used to be more honest. They used to say, we're opposed to 4 weeks leave. They voted against 4 weeks leave here in this House, and they said that they don't want it. Now what they're pretending to do is to say that we really support it. But if you're poor, you shouldn't have a 4th week holiday. If you're a vulnerable worker and you don't earn enough to keep your family, you can cash up your holiday and not have that. And we know that low wage earners are the ones who are most likely to do that. They are the very people under the most pressure in their households, the very families that are struggling the most, that are causing all sorts of problems within the families, and they are the ones who this National Party are attacking. They are the ones who are most vulnerable, and they are the ones who are being attacked by the National Party. Now, Kate Wilkinson says that they won't come under pressure. Employers won't be able to pressure people. What she says is that cashing in annual leave can't be a term or condition of the employee's employment. You know, it can't be part of what you advertise at the beginning. But isn't that what she said about 90 days? That is exactly what she said about 90 days. That it's the employee's choice. It wasn't going to be one of the conditions as people were employed, Mr. Speaker. And I notice that Kate Wilkinson is not replying, she's not focusing, she's not listening, and I think it is pathetic that a minister in this House is not this early in a debate focusing on the inconsistency and the hypocrisy of someone who claimed that the 90-day bill couldn't be part of the conditions of employment that people application for. She's making the same claim about this, and we know that that is not true, and that she has no way, and they are holding their heads down in shame over there. It's interesting to see, as soon as the noisy Maori, Paul Quinn and Tohanare leave the House, the two, they put their heads down, they look ashamed, and so might they look ashamed, those particular pair. Well, Mr. Speaker, already in the first 12 months while this government has been in place, wages in Australia increased by 2.5% more in Australia than in New Zealand. 2.5% more on an average weekly wages in Australia than New Zealand. That was the government that promised to close that gap. And what they have done, as they did, to be fair, the national governments are consistent, right through the 1990s, that gap opened up. Under the Employment Contracts Act, it opened up massively during the 1990s, and they are true to form. The National Party is true to form. It's what they believe in. They believe in lower wages. It's part of their raison d'etre. They don't believe in high wages and good skills. They don't believe in decent capital investment. They believe in the spiral to the bottom. They believe in competing for low-wage jobs with China and India. That is the sort of approach that they want to have to drive wages down in New Zealand, and this is the sort of legislation that is designed to do it. And as far as holidays is concerned, New Zealand workers actually have fewer holidays than the vast majority of like countries, certainly around the OECD. We're holiday starved in New Zealand, and she might well hang her head in shame, the Minister of Labour, as she is doing now. She should be ashamed of the fact that the country with one of the fewest holidays in the OECD, and she is there and she is taking them away. Now, the one other thing I think as far as the stopping the sickie, I think the only thing that I want to say about that is that Peter Dunn's got it right. I agree with Peter Dunn, and I welcome his support for the opposition on this legislation. It's good to see a minister who is prepared to stand up for his principles and to abandon the government on this. And he says that it is unworkable. He says that the sickie provisions are unworkable, and any of us who live in low-income areas, who see long queues to doctor's surgery, we say to Kate Wilkinson, do you really want someone who's got a couple of days flu to go and infect everyone else in the doctors? Someone with gastric problems, do you want them to go there? Someone who's got leave to look after a kid, do you really want a kid dragged out of bed in order to go to the doctor? And my view, Mr. Speaker, is that we don't. I think what we want to have, and what we've got. I mean, I think it's fair to say that when we were in government, we got a little bit of criticism from some of our friends and colleagues in the union movement for not going far enough. But the objective in that legislation was, introduced by the Honourable Margaret Wilson, was to get a balance that could be sustained because it was fair. And that member, Kate Wilkinson, is undoing that balance, and that is unfair.
David.